Before I start writing, let me drop a quick question for you. What time is it where you are, and where are you watching from? Go ahead and tell me in the comments. I read every single one. I want to tell you something I've never really put into words before. Not because I was ashamed exactly. More because I didn't think anyone would believe me. Or maybe because I wasn't sure I believed it myself, until I was standing in that conference room, watching my aunt's face go completely white, and realizing that everything my grandmother had quietly promised me over years of Sunday afternoons and bad instant coffee had actually been real. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. My name is Piper. I'm 31 years old. I drive a 2014 Honda Civic with a crack in the passenger side mirror that I've been meaning to fix for about 2 years now. I rent a one-bedroom apartment in Columbus, Ohio, and until 8 months ago I worked as an intake coordinator at a nonprofit that helped adults with disabilities find job placement. The salary was $38,000 a year, before taxes. I want you to hold on to that number. Because my family certainly did. My grandmother, Gran, we all called her, raised me. My mom left when I was 4. Not dramatically, not with a fight or a custody battle. She just sort of drifted, came back occasionally for holidays when it suited her, sent birthday cards with cash inside when she remembered. Gran never said anything ugly about her. She just quietly filled every space my mother left empty, and she did it without making me feel like a burden, which I think is one of the hardest things a person can do. Gran had a modest house in Milford, Ohio. Small yard, a vegetable garden she was unreasonably proud of, a screened porch where she drank her coffee every morning regardless of the weather. She was a retired school librarian. She drove a 10-year-old Buick. She clipped coupons out of the Sunday paper even after I showed her how to find them online. She did not, from the outside, look like a woman who had been quietly building something for decades. My aunt, my mom's older sister, is named Cheryl. Cheryl married well, as she has reminded everyone within earshot for the better part of 30 years. Her husband, my uncle, runs a commercial real estate firm in Cincinnati. They have a house with a 3-car garage and a kitchen that was featured in a regional home design magazine in 2019, which Cheryl has not stopped mentioning since. Her daughter, my cousin, is named Brittany. Brittany is 2 years older than me, works in pharmaceutical sales, drives the leased BMW, and once told me at Christmas dinner that my career path was admirable but not scalable. I'm not telling you this to make them sound like villains. I'm telling you this because context matters. And because for a long time, I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. The doubt ran out eventually. It always does. The last Thanksgiving before everything changed, I drove to Gran's house and arrived to find Cheryl and Brittany already there, both dressed like they were going to a business luncheon. Cheryl had brought a catered tray of appetizers. She made a point of mentioning she'd had them made by a caterer, not just store-bought, as she was unpacking them. Gran was in the kitchen in her apron, making the same cornbread stuffing she had made every year since before I was born. I went in and helped her. That's what I always did. We stood at the counter together and she hummed something I didn't recognize and handed me the celery to chop, and for a little while everything was okay. Then Brittany came in and said, "Piper, did you take the highway or the back road? I feel like that drive gets longer every time." And before I could answer, Cheryl said, "Brittany just got a company car, fully loaded. She barely even thinks about the drive anymore." I said that was great. Gran handed me the celery and didn't look up. By the time we sat down to eat, the subject had somehow turned to the apartment I was renting. Cheryl asked how much I was paying. I told her. She made a sound, not quite a word, more of a small hum of pity, and said, "For one bedroom, in Columbus? You really should think about building equity, Piper, at your age." "She's doing just fine," Gran said. Her voice was quiet, it always was, but it landed. Cheryl smiled at her and changed the subject, and that was that. Gran pressed her foot gently against mine under the table. She did that sometimes, a small thing, a signal that meant, "I see you. I know. You're not imagining it." After dinner, while Cheryl and Brittany were debating whether to drive back that night or stay, Gran and I did the dishes. She washed, I dried. She told me about a book she'd been reading. She asked about a coworker I'd mentioned in a phone call 2 weeks earlier. She remembered details like that. She always had. Before I left, she hugged me at the door and held on a little longer than usual. She said, "You've always been patient, Piper. I want you to keep being patient a little longer. Can you do that for me?" I said yes, though I didn't fully understand what I was agreeing to. She died in February. A stroke in the middle of the night. She was 79. The doctor said she likely didn't feel anything, that it was fast. I don't know if that's something they always say, or if it was true in her case. I choose to believe it was true. I drove to Milford the next morning and sat in her kitchen alone for about an hour before anyone else arrived. I made coffee with the machine she'd had for 20 years that you had to kind of wiggle the carafe to get it to brew right. I sat at her table. I looked at her garden through the kitchen window. The raised beds were empty and brown with winter, but I could see the outline of where her tomatoes would go in May, the wooden stakes still in the ground from last year. I thought about all the Sunday afternoons I'd spent at that table. How she'd pushed a plate of cookies toward me and listened without judgment and given advice only when I asked for it. I thought about how much space she took up in my life without ever demanding any space back. I cried then, properly, by myself, in her kitchen, with her coffee mug in my hands. By the time Cheryl arrived, I had put myself back together. The reading of the will was scheduled for 3 weeks later at the office of Grand's attorney, a man named Mr. Whitfield, whose office was above a dry cleaner in downtown Milford. I drove myself. I arrived early. I sat in a chair by the window and watched the street below and told myself it didn't matter what was in the document. Gran had already given me everything that mattered. I told myself that and mostly believed it. Cheryl and Brittany arrived together. Cheryl was wearing a blazer. She set her purse on the chair beside her like she was saving it for someone important. My uncle didn't come. He'd sent his regrets, apparently. Mr. Whitfield was a small, precise man with reading glasses on a chain around his neck. He arranged his papers carefully and thanked us for coming and said he wanted to acknowledge what a remarkable woman my grandmother had been, which made my throat tighten. Then he began. Gran had left Cheryl her china set and the dining room furniture which had been in the family for years, and a sum of $12,000. Cheryl nodded slowly at this. Her expression was composed, but I could see her doing some kind of calculation behind her eyes. She had left Brittany her jewelry box, costume pieces mostly, and a few small gold things, and $8,000. Then Mr. Whitfield looked at me. He said that my grandmother had left me the house in Milford, the contents of her investment accounts, and a parcel of land she owned in eastern Tennessee that had been in her family since the 1940s. He paused. He said the total value of the bequest was approximately $340,000, the house and property in Ohio accounting for the larger portion, the Tennessee land for a smaller but significant part, and the investment accounts for the remainder. The room was very quiet. I don't think I moved for a long moment. I was looking at Mr. Whitfield's papers and not really seeing them. Cheryl said, "I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?" He did. She said, "The house." Not a question, a statement. Flat, like she was setting it down to look at it. "Yes," Mr. Whitfield said. "The property at 4 Elm Creek Drive, along with its contents, with the exception of the items specifically bequeathed to you and your daughter. And the investment accounts. Again, not a question. Your mother had been contributing to a brokerage account for approximately 22 years, he said. She was quite disciplined about it. There was a letter. Mr. Whitfield passed it to me across the desk. It was in a sealed envelope with my name on it in Gran's handwriting. I held it in both hands and didn't open it. Brittany said something to her mother in a low voice. I didn't catch the words, but I heard the tone. Cheryl looked at me. Her face had done something complicated while I wasn't watching and was now very still. She said, "Piper, I'm sure you understand that she must have made this decision when she wasn't entirely—" "She updated the will 14 months ago," Mr. Whitfield said, not unkindly but precisely. "I met with her in person. She was entirely clear and coherent. There's no question of capacity. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. Heavy. like something had just been placed on the table between us, and nobody wanted to be the first one to acknowledge it was there. I looked down at the envelope in my hands. I thought about what Gran had said at the door that last Thanksgiving. About patience, about holding on a little longer. I understood it now. I drove home to Columbus that evening. The crack in my passenger mirror caught the last of the winter light and split it into angles across the dashboard. I had the envelope on the seat beside me. I didn't open it until I was parked outside my apartment building, engine off, the street quiet. The letter was 2 pages, handwritten. Her penmanship was the same as it had always been. Small, careful, tilted slightly to the right. She said she had watched me for years, choosing work that mattered over work that paid well. She said she had watched me be kind to people who weren't always kind back. She said she had watched me show up quietly, consistently, without needing to be praised for it. She said she wanted to make sure that quietness didn't cost me. She said the land in Tennessee had been her own grandmother's, passed down through women in the family who had held onto it through hard decades because they understood. That land doesn't argue with you, doesn't leave, doesn't make you feel small. She wanted it to go to someone who would understand that. She said she knew I would not use it to make a point to anyone. She said that was exactly why she was leaving it to me. At the bottom of the second page she had written, "I have loved you without condition. Please don't be afraid to take up space." I sat in my car for a long time after that. The weeks that followed were strange. I hired a real estate attorney, a woman named Ms. Park, recommended by a colleague to help me understand what I'd inherited and what my options were. I had the Tennessee parcel appraised. It was a 23-acre piece of land, partially wooded, with frontage on a creek, in a county that had been getting more attention from buyers in recent years. I didn't tell my family about any of this while it was in process. I just moved through it quietly the way Gran had moved through things. One step, then the next. Cheryl called twice. The first time, the week after the reading, she said she wanted to sit down and talk through things together as a family. Her voice had a particular quality to it, conciliatory on the surface and something else underneath. I said I would let her know when I had more time. The second call, about a month later. She said she'd been speaking with her own attorney and that she had some concerns about the timeline of when Gran had updated the will and whether there might be outside influences at play. I asked her what outside influences she had in mind. There was a pause. She said she just meant she wanted to make sure everything had been handled properly. I told her Mr. Whitfield had 30 years of experience and Gran had known exactly what she was doing, and then I wished her a good evening and ended the call. I'm not going to pretend that didn't feel like something. It did. It felt like a small door closing, and it felt, at the same time, like a small door finally being allowed to close. Brittany texted me once. It said, "Hey, I'm sure this is all a lot. Let me know if you ever want to grab lunch and just catch up." I read it, thought about it for a while, and did not respond. Gran's house went on the market in April. I had decided, after a lot of thought, after walking through every room twice, after standing in the garden on a cold morning touching the wooden stakes from her tomato beds, that selling it was the right thing. I wasn't in a position to move to Milford, and the house was meant to be lived in. She would have wanted it lived in. It sold in 11 days, good market, good bones as the realtor said. Someone bought it with plans to repaint the porch and keep the garden, which felt right. I used a portion of what I received to pay off the remaining balance on my student loans, $26,000, which I had been carrying for 9 years and which I had honestly stopped fully believing I would ever see the end of. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and made that payment and then sat there for a minute just looking at the confirmation screen. I thought about the Thanksgiving dinner, about the catered appetizers, about building equity, Piper, at your age. I didn't feel triumphant exactly. I felt something quieter than that. Like I'd been carrying a weight I'd gotten so used to that I'd stopped noticing it, and then someone had simply reached over and lifted it. And what I was feeling was the absence of it. The Tennessee land I've kept, for now. I've visited it once, drove down in June, walked the creek line in the early morning, stood in the middle of 23 acres of something that had been held by women in my family for 80 years. It's not worth what a $69 million diamond ring would be worth. It doesn't need to be. It's mine. She made sure of that. And when I stood there in the quiet, in the trees, in the sound of that creek, moving over rocks the way it had been moving long before any of us were alive, I understood what she meant about land not arguing with you. I've been asked, since all of this, whether I'm angry, whether I want to confront my family, whether I feel like I won. I don't think I won anything. I think my grandmother loved me carefully and specifically and over a very long time, and I think she knew things about the people around her that she never said out loud, and I think she made a decision that reflected everything she understood about each of us. I think the most powerful thing she gave me was not the house or the accounts or the land, it was the letter, those 2 pages, the words at the bottom. Please don't be afraid to take up space. I'm working on that part. I still drive the Civic. The mirror is still cracked. Some things don't change all at once, and that's okay. But I sleep differently now. I make decisions differently. I look at my life and I don't see what my family saw. The $38,000 salary, the one-bedroom apartment, the absence of a company car. I see what Gran saw. Someone who shows up, someone who stays, someone, she believed, who was worth leaving something to. If you've ever been in a family where you felt invisible, where the measuring stick was always someone else's and you were always coming up short, I want you to know that someone in your corner can change everything. Not because of what they leave you, because of what they see in you. And if you're lucky enough to have that person while you still have them, go sit at their table. Do the dishes with them. Let them press their foot against yours under the table. You'll understand later why it mattered. If this reached you today, if something in this story felt familiar, leave me a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever had a person like that in your life. I'll be reading everyone. I've thought a lot about why Gran did what she did the way she did it. Not the money, not the house, not the land in Tennessee, the how of it, the patience of it, the 22 years of quiet, consistent contributions to an account nobody knew about, the 14-month-old updated will, the letter folded and sealed and waiting. She didn't do any of it in anger. She didn't do it to make a point at anyone's expense. She did it because she had watched carefully for a long time and she understood something that I think most of us spend our whole lives either learning or refusing to learn, that the choices you make when no one is watching are the ones that actually define you. Cheryl spent years performing success, the catered appetizers, the kitchen in the magazine, the pointed questions about my rent delivered in a tone that was somehow both polite and devastating. And I'm not saying that to be cruel about her. I think she genuinely believed that visible success was the same thing as real security. I think she had confused the appearance of a life with the life itself. Gran never made that mistake. She lived in the same house for 40 years. She drove the same Buick. She clipped coupons. And underneath all of that, quietly, she was building something that no one could take away. And she was watching to see who in her family understood what things were actually worth. I think about the choices I made during those years that looked like nothing from the outside. Staying in a job that paid $38,000 because it mattered to the people I was helping. Not explaining myself to my aunt. Not defending my life choices at holiday dinners. Not trying to prove anything to anyone who had already decided what they thought of me. At the time, I thought I was just surviving. Looking back, I think I was passing a test I didn't know I was taking. There's a version of this story where I gloat, where I call Cheryl back and say something sharp and final, where I send Brittany a text that makes the point I've been holding on to for years. I'm not going to pretend that version didn't cross my mind, but I keep coming back to what Gran wrote at the bottom of that second page. She said she knew I wouldn't use it to make a point to anyone. She said that was exactly why she was leaving it to me. That sentence did something to me. It still does, because she wasn't just leaving me money. She was telling me who she believed I was. And the most important thing I can do with that, more important than the house or the accounts or the Tennessee land, is live up to it. Integrity isn't dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It's the person who does the dishes after Thanksgiving dinner when no one asks them to. It's the person who shows up to a job that doesn't pay enough because the work is worth doing. It's the person who drives home with a cracked mirror and doesn't feel sorry for themselves about it. And intelligence isn't credentials. It's knowing what matters. It's understanding, like Gran understood, that what you do with 22 quiet years is more significant than anything you could say in a single loud moment. I'm still working on the part about taking up space. But I think I'm getting there, and I think that's exactly what she wanted for me.